The first light of dawn touched the rooftops of Alder Hollow with gentle fingers. Fiona Wexler stood at her kitchen window, watching the sky transform from deep purple to soft pink. She held a cup of tea between her weathered hands, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. This was her favorite moment of the day, the quiet before the world woke up. Fiona was 68 years old. Her hair had turned completely silver, which she kept in a practical shortcut. Her face showed the lines of a life well lived, with deep creases around her eyes that suggested both laughter and worry. She was tall for a woman of her generation, with broad shoulders and strong arms that still served her well in her work. She lived alone in a small cottage on Maple Street, one of the quieter roads in Alder Hollow. The cottage was simple but comfortable. She had painted the walls herself in soft cream colors. There were plants on every windowsill, geraniums, spider plants, and a stubborn cactus that had survived 12 English winters. The furniture was second-hand but well-maintained. Everything had its place. Fiona finished her tea and rinsed the cup carefully. She looked at the clock on the wall. 5:30 in the morning. Time to prepare for work. She went to her small bedroom and changed into her work clothes. Dark blue trousers, a matching jacket with the Alder Hollow Council logo on the breast, and sturdy boots that had been resoled twice. She tied her boots carefully, making sure the laces were secure. Then she picked up her high-visibility vest from the hook by the door and put it on. Before leaving, she checked her small pack, a bottle of water, a sandwich she had made the night before, cheese and tomato on brown bread, a small first aid kit. She had learned long ago to be prepared. The streets of Alder Hollow were empty as Fiona stepped outside. The air was crisp and clean. She breathed deeply, enjoying the sensation. This was a different kind of morning from the ones she had known in her previous life. Different, but welcome. She walked to the council depot, a 10-minute journey through streets she knew by heart. Every crack in the pavement, every garden gate that squeaked, every house with its own character. Mrs. Patterson's cottage with the bright blue door, the Williams family home with the tire swing in the front garden, the old bakery building that had been converted into a bookshop. Alder Hollow was a small town in the countryside of England, about 20 miles from any major city. It had a population of just over 3,000 people. There was a main street with shops, a church that dated back to the 14th century, a primary school, and a pub called the Green Man that had served ale for 400 years. The surrounding countryside was gentle, rolling hills with farms and woodland. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where people still said good morning to strangers, where the biggest news might be a new baby or someone's vegetable winning first prize at the summer fair. Fiona had lived here for 12 years. She had chosen Alder Hollow specifically because it was small and quiet, because no one here knew anything about her past, because she could be just another person, living a simple life. At the depot, she collected her equipment, a wheeled cart, a long-handled brush, a grabber for picking up litter, and several bags. Tom Henderson, the depot supervisor, was already there, preparing the day's assignments. "Morning, Fiona," Tom said with a smile. He was a kind man in his 50s, with a round belly and a face that seemed designed for smiling. "Good morning, Tom," Fiona replied. Her voice was calm and measured, with a hint of an accent that suggested she might have grown up somewhere else, though she never spoke about it. "Same route as usual?" Tom asked. "Yes, please," Fiona said. "I know it best." Tom handed her a checklist. "The High Street, the park, and the area around the church. Council wants the town looking good for the weekend market." "I'll make sure it's spotless," Fiona promised. She set off with her cart, the wheels making a gentle rumbling sound on the pavement. The sun was rising now, painting everything gold. Fiona began her work on the high street, sweeping carefully, picking up the occasional piece of litter. A candy wrapper here, a discarded receipt there. She worked methodically, with the same care and attention she brought to everything. As she worked, the town began to wake up. Shop owners arrived to open their businesses. The baker, Mr. Chen, waved to her from his doorway. The smell of fresh bread drifted out onto the street. "Beautiful morning, Miss Fiona," he called. "Indeed it is, Mr. Chen," she replied. People greeted her as they passed. She knew most of them by name, or at least by face. There was young Sarah Miller heading to open the flower shop. Old Mr. Thornton, walking his ancient terrier. The postman, delivering mail with his usual cheerful efficiency. "Morning, Fiona." "Keeping our streets beautiful as always," the postman said. "Just doing my job, Malcolm," Fiona replied with a small smile. This was her life now, simple, quiet, predictable. She swept streets, she kept the town clean, she went home each evening to her cottage, she read books from the library, she tended her plants. She occasionally had tea with Mrs. Davies from next door. No one in Alderhollow knew that Fiona Wexler had once been Dr. Fiona Wexler, one of the United Kingdom's leading experts in nuclear safety. No one knew that she had spent 25 years working at one of the country's largest nuclear power stations. No one knew that she had been responsible for the safety systems that protected thousands of people. And no one knew why she had left that life behind. By mid-morning, Fiona had finished the high street and moved on to Victoria Park, the town's main green space. The park was beautiful in the morning light. There were old oak trees, their branches spreading wide. A pond where ducks lived year-round. Flower beds that the local gardening club maintained with pride. A playground where children would soon arrive to play. Fiona worked her way around the paths, collecting the litter that had accumulated. Crisp packets, drink cans, the occasional lost toy. She picked up each item carefully, sorting them into the appropriate bags for recycling or waste. As she worked, she noticed things. The way the oak trees were developing a fungal growth on their lower trunks. She would mention that to the parks department. The way the pond water levels seemed lower than usual. Perhaps the pump needed checking. A loose board on one of the park benches, someone could get a splinter. This attention to detail was part of who Fiona was. She had always noticed things. It was a trait that had served her well in her previous career, and it served her well now, even in this much simpler job. "Fiona! Fiona!" a young voice called out. She turned to see 8-year-old Emma Richardson running toward her, her mother walking more slowly behind. Emma was a bright child with red hair and pigtails and a face full of freckles. "Hello, Emma," Fiona said warmly. "Shouldn't you be at school?" "Dentist appointment," Emma announced proudly. "And I didn't have any cavities." "That's wonderful news. You must be taking very good care of your teeth." Emma beamed. "Mom, can I help Miss Fiona pick up litter?" Emma's mother, Jennifer, arrived looking slightly out of breath. "Emma, Miss Fiona is working. We shouldn't interrupt." "It's no interruption at all," Fiona assured her. "But we need to get to school after your dentist visit, don't we?" "I suppose," Emma said, slightly disappointed. "Tell you what," Fiona said. "Next Saturday, if your mother says it's all right, you can help me in the park for half an hour. I'll teach you about recycling." Emma's face lit up. "Really? Can I, Mum?" Jennifer smiled. "That's very kind of you, Miss Fiona." "Yes, that would be lovely." "It's settled then," Fiona said. "Saturday at 10 o'clock, right here." Emma skipped away happily, and Jennifer gave Fiona a grateful look. "You're wonderful with children. Were you a teacher before you retired?" Fiona felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came whenever someone asked about her past. She had prepared an answer long ago, one that was vague enough to discourage further questions. "I worked in engineering," she said simply. "Nothing very interesting. I prefer the outdoors now." "Well, you're a treasure to this town," Jennifer said warmly. "Everyone says so." After they left, Fiona continued her work. The exchange had been pleasant, but it reminded her of the constant care she had to take. Every conversation was a potential minefield. Every question about her past required careful navigation. She had been in Alder Hollow for 12 years, but she still felt like she was hiding, because she was. Not from the law. She had done nothing wrong. Not from enemies. She had none. She was hiding from herself, from memories, from a past that still haunted her dreams. By lunchtime, Fiona had finished the park and moved on to the area around St. Mary's Church. The church was the oldest building in Alder Hollow, built in 1347 from local stone. Its tower rose above the town, visible from miles away. The graveyard surrounded it, with headstones dating back centuries. Fiona worked carefully here, showing respect for the space. She swept the path that led to the church entrance. She picked up leaves that had blown against the church walls. She made sure the area around the war memorial was clean. Father Michael emerged from the church as she was finishing. He was a man in his 60s, with white hair and kind eyes. "Good afternoon, Fiona," he said. "Thank you for taking such good care of our church." "Good afternoon, Father. It's a privilege to work here." "Have you eaten lunch yet?" Mrs. Patterson brought far too many sandwiches for the church committee meeting. "We have plenty to spare." Fiona was about to politely decline, as she usually did, but her stomach rumbled quietly. She had been working for nearly 7 hours. "That's very kind." "Thank you." They sat on a bench in the churchyard, and Father Michael shared the sandwiches. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the birds in the ancient yew trees. "You've been with us for quite some time now," Father Michael said eventually. 12 years, isn't it?" "Yes," Fiona confirmed, "and yet we know so little about you. You're always kind, always helpful, but you keep yourself private." Fiona didn't respond immediately. Father Michael had a way of asking questions that felt gentle rather than intrusive. "I had a difficult time in my previous life," she said finally. "I needed a fresh start." "A quiet place. Alder Hollow gave me that." "I understand," Father Michael said. "We all carry burdens. Sometimes the kindest thing the world can do is give us space to heal." "Yes," Fiona said softly. "Exactly that." They finished their sandwiches, and Fiona returned to work. But Father Michael's words stayed with her. 12 years she had been healing. 12 years of quiet, of sweeping streets and living simply, of keeping her past locked away. Sometimes she wondered if she had healed at all, or if she had simply become very good at hiding. The afternoon passed in its usual rhythm. Fiona completed her rounds, returned her equipment to the depot, and signed out with Tom. "Another job well done," Tom said, checking off her completion form. "See you tomorrow, Fiona." "See you tomorrow, Tom." She walked home through the town, taking the long route because the weather was pleasant. She passed the Green Man pub, where the early evening crowd was beginning to gather. She could hear laughter and conversation through the open windows. She passed the small library where Mrs. Henderson, Tom's wife, worked as the librarian. Through the window, Fiona could see her helping a young person find a book. She passed the community center, where a sign announced various activities: yoga on Monday evenings, the gardening club on Wednesday afternoons, the historical society on Thursday evenings, and bingo on Friday nights. Alder Hollow was alive with small connections, small kindnesses, small communities within the larger community. Fiona appreciated this about the town. She participated in some activities. She went to the gardening club occasionally, and she sometimes attended the talks at the Historical Society. But she was always careful not to get too close to anyone. Close friendships meant questions about the past. They meant vulnerability. As she approached her cottage, she saw Mrs. Davies in her front garden, tending to her roses. Mrs. Davies was in her 70s, a widow who had lived in Alderhollow her entire life. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Davies called out. "I made too much soup today. Would you like some?" This was a frequent occurrence. Mrs. Davies often made too much of something, which Fiona suspected was her kind way of making sure her neighbor was eating properly. "That's very thoughtful, Mrs. Davies." "Thank you." Mrs. Davies bustled inside and returned with a large container of soup. Vegetable and barley. Very healthy. You work so hard, you need good food. "You're very kind," Fiona said, taking the container. "Would you like to come in for tea?" "Oh, no, dear. I have my sister visiting in half an hour, but perhaps tomorrow?" "Tomorrow would be lovely." Inside her cottage, Fiona heated the soup and ate it with fresh bread from Mr. Chen's bakery. It was delicious. She washed the dishes carefully, then spent the evening as she usually did. She read for a while, a mystery novel from the library. She watered her plants. She wrote in her journal, something she had done every day for the past 12 years. The journal entries were simple. What she had done that day. The weather. Small observations about the town. She never wrote about her feelings. She never wrote about her past. The journal was a record of her present life only. At 9 o'clock, she prepared for bed. She brushed her teeth, changed into her nightgown, and climbed under the covers. She read for another 20 minutes, then turned off the light. Sleep came slowly, as it often did. In the darkness, memories tried to surface. She pushed them down firmly. That was the past. This was now. She was safe here. She was content here. She repeated these thoughts like a mantra until finally she drifted into sleep. The days in Alderhollow followed a comfortable pattern. Monday through Friday, Fiona worked for the council. Saturday mornings, she did her shopping at the weekend market and took care of household tasks. Saturday afternoons were her own time. Sunday mornings, she sometimes attended church, though she was not particularly religious. Sunday afternoons, she took long walks in the countryside. On this particular Saturday, Fiona kept her promise to young Emma Richardson. At 10 o'clock, she met the girl in Victoria Park with extra equipment, a small grabber that Emma could use safely, and a bag for collecting litter. "Remember," Fiona instructed, "we never pick up anything that might be dangerous. If you see broken glass, or anything sharp, or anything that looks strange, you tell me. Understood?" "Understood," Emma said seriously. For the next half hour, they worked together. Fiona explained about recycling, about how plastic takes hundreds of years to break down, about why it was important to keep public spaces clean. Emma listened intently, asking smart questions. Jennifer Richardson watched from a bench, reading a book, but keeping an eye on her daughter. When the half hour was up, Emma ran to her mother with her full bag of collected litter. "Look, Mom, we found so much, and Miss Fiona taught me all about recycling." "I can see that," Jennifer said with a smile. "What do you say to Miss Fiona?" "Thank you, Miss Fiona. Can we do it again?" "Perhaps once a month," Fiona suggested, "if your mother agrees." "That would be wonderful," Jennifer said. "Emma talks about you often. You've been a positive influence on her." After they left, Fiona disposed of the litter properly and headed to the market. The weekend market was held in the square near the church, with stalls selling fresh produce, homemade crafts, baked goods, and various other items. Fiona bought vegetables from the Watson farm stand, fresh eggs from the Turner farm, and a loaf of sourdough bread from a small bakery 2 towns over that brought their goods to the Alder Hollow market. As she shopped, she exchanged greetings with dozens of people. Everyone knew Miss Fiona, the street sweeper who kept their town clean. She was a familiar figure, part of the fabric of the community. Fiona! Just the person I wanted to see? It was Margaret Thornton, the town mayor. She was an energetic woman in her 50s, always bustling with civic enthusiasm. "Good morning, Mayor Thornton," Fiona said. "Please call me Margaret. We've known each other for years. Listen, I wanted to thank you personally. The regional inspector was here last week, and she specifically commented on how clean and well-maintained our town is. A lot of that is down to your hard work." "I'm just doing my job," Fiona said modestly. "You do it exceptionally well. The council is lucky to have you. Are you coming to the town hall meeting on Wednesday? We're discussing the plans for the summer festival." "I might," Fiona said non-committally. She usually avoided town hall meetings. Too many people, too much attention. "Please do. We could use your input. You know this town better than most." After the mayor moved on, Fiona continued her shopping. She bought a small plant from the garden stall, a lavender that would look nice on her kitchen windowsill. She purchased a jar of local honey. She browsed the bookstall, looking for something new to read. By noon, she had everything she needed and headed home. She spent the afternoon in her garden. The cottage had a small back garden that she had transformed over the years into a peaceful space. There were raised beds where she grew vegetables and herbs, flower beds with perennials that came back year after year, a small wooden bench where she could sit and enjoy the space. Gardening was one of the few activities that truly relaxed her. There was something meditative about working with soil and plants. Something that required attention, but not the intense, high-stakes attention of her former life. If she made a mistake with a plant, no one would die. The worst that could happen was the plant wouldn't thrive. This simplicity was precious to her. As she worked, pulling weeds and checking on her tomato plants, her mind wandered. She thought about Emma Richardson, so eager and curious. She thought about how nice it felt to teach someone, to share knowledge. In her old life, she had trained many people. She had been known as an excellent teacher, patient and clear in her explanations. She missed that sometimes, the sense of purpose, the feeling that her knowledge mattered, but it had come at such a cost. That night, Fiona had the dream again. She was in the control room, banks of monitors glowing in the dim light, the hum of machinery, the smell of electronics and filtered air. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. Then the alarm, red lights flashing, the warning klaxon, people moving, controlled but urgent, procedures being followed, her own voice, calm and clear, giving instructions, systems being checked, readings being analyzed, the leak, small, contained, but still a leak, radiation levels rising in Sector 7, evacuation protocols activated, emergency teams deploying. Her hands on the controls, her mind racing through calculations, through contingencies, through everything that could go wrong. And underneath it all, the fear, the terrible, crushing weight of knowing that thousands of lives depended on the decisions being made in that moment. That one wrong choice, one miscalculation, one system failure could mean disaster. The leak was contained, the danger passed. But in the dream, as in reality, the fear didn't stop. It built and built, crushing her until she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't. Fiona woke with a gasp, her heart pounding, sweat on her forehead. She sat up in bed, breathing hard, orienting herself. She was in her cottage, in Alder Hollow. It was just a dream, just a memory. She looked at the clock, 3 in the morning. She knew she wouldn't sleep again for a while. She got up, put on her dressing gown, and went to the kitchen. She made chamomile tea and sat by the window, looking out at the dark street. The dream came less frequently now than it had in the early years. In those first months after leaving the power station, it had come almost every night. Gradually, with time and therapy and the quiet rhythms of her new life, it had faded. Now it appeared perhaps once a month, a reminder that she could never completely escape her past. The therapy had helped. After the incident, after her breakdown, the company had provided counseling. She had been diagnosed with severe anxiety and post-traumatic stress. The therapist had explained that she had been carrying an impossible burden for too long, that the constant responsibility for catastrophic risk had worn her down gradually, and the incident had been the breaking point. "You didn't fail," the therapist had told her. "You succeeded. The leak was contained. No one was hurt. The systems worked because you and your team did everything right, but you can't do this work anymore. Not now. Maybe not ever. And that's okay. You need to give yourself permission to step away." It had taken her a long time to accept that she, who had been so strong, so capable, so essential, was now broken, that she couldn't go back. So she had stepped away. She had taken early retirement on medical grounds. She had received her pension and a generous settlement. She had said goodbye to colleagues who didn't quite understand why she was leaving. She had packed up her flat in the city, and she had found Alder Hollow. 12 years ago. 12 years of healing. Or hiding. She still wasn't entirely sure which it was. Fiona finished her tea and went back to bed. She lay in the darkness, breathing slowly and evenly, practicing the techniques the therapist had taught her. Eventually, she drifted into a lighter, dreamless sleep. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Fiona decided to attend church. She didn't go every week, but Father Michael's gentle presence was comforting sometimes, and the routine of the service had its own peace. The church was about half full, which was typical. The congregation was mostly older people, though there were a few younger families. Fiona sat in her usual spot, a pew near the back, where she could slip out quietly if she needed to. The service followed its familiar pattern: hymns, prayers, readings, Father Michael's sermon. He spoke about community and caring for one another, about how even small acts of kindness could change someone's life, about how everyone had gifts to share with the world. Fiona listened, feeling the words settle over her like a gentle weight. Did she have gifts to share? She had thought so once. She had been proud of her work, of her expertise. Now her gifts consisted of sweeping streets and growing tomatoes. Was that enough? Most days, she thought it was. But sometimes, like now, she felt a twinge of something. Not quite regret, but a sense of loss for the person she had been. After the service, there was tea and biscuits in the church hall. Fiona stayed for a short while, exchanging pleasantries with other parishioners. Mrs. Davies was there with her sister, Tom Henderson and his wife, the Millers who ran the flower shop, all familiar faces, all people she knew well enough to chat with, but not so well that they probed into her life. "How are you finding that mystery novel, Fiona?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "The one you borrowed last week?" "It's quite good," Fiona replied. "I'm about halfway through. The plot is clever." "I thought you'd enjoy it." "When you're finished, I have another author you might like. Similar style, but with more historical detail." "That sounds perfect. Thank you. Small talk, safe talk, the kind of conversation that built community without demanding vulnerability." Fiona left after about 20 minutes and walked home through the town. It was a beautiful Sunday, and many people were out enjoying the weather. Children played in their gardens. Couples walked hand in hand. Someone was mowing their lawn, the smell of fresh-cut grass filling the air. She spent the afternoon taking her usual Sunday walk. She followed the footpath that led out of town into the surrounding countryside, past fields where sheep grazed, past a small stream where she sometimes saw kingfishers, up a gentle hill that offered a view of the entire valley. From this vantage point, she could see Alder Hollow nestled below, the church tower rising above the houses, the green space of Victoria Park, the main street, beyond it, rolling farmland stretching to the horizon. It was beautiful, peaceful, safe. Fiona sat on a wooden stile and ate the apple she had brought with her. She watched clouds drift across the sky. She listened to birdsong. She let her mind empty of thoughts and simply existed in the moment. This was what she had come here for. This peace. This simplicity. The ability to just be, without the weight of enormous responsibility, without the constant vigilance, without the fear. She stayed until the afternoon began to cool, then walked back to town. On her way, she met the Watson family coming back from their own walk, their 2 young sons running ahead on the path. "Lovely day for it," Mr. Watson said, tipping his cap to her. "Indeed it is," Fiona agreed. One of the boys, about 6 years old, stopped and looked at her seriously. "Are you the lady who keeps our town clean?" "I help with that. Yes," Fiona said. "My teacher says we should always put litter in the bin because people like you work hard to keep things nice." "Your teacher is very wise," Fiona said with a smile. "I always put my litter in the bin," the boy announced proudly. "That's very responsible of you." The family moved on, and Fiona continued home. It was a small interaction, but it pleased her. The children in this town were being taught to care for their environment, to respect the work others did. These were good lessons. That evening, she prepared a simple dinner, roasted vegetables from her garden with fresh bread. She ate while reading, then spent time organizing some paperwork. She paid her utility bills, filed some documents, made a shopping list for the coming week. Ordinary tasks, an ordinary evening, an ordinary life. And yet, as she prepared for bed, she felt a strange unease. Nothing she could point to specifically, just a feeling that something was slightly off. She checked her cottage carefully, making sure everything was secure. She looked out the windows at the quiet street. Everything appeared normal. She attributed it to the dream from the previous night. Residual anxiety. Sometimes it took a day or two for the effects to fully fade. She went to bed and, mercifully, slept soundly through the night. Monday morning arrived with clouds and a light drizzle. Fiona dressed in her work clothes and added a waterproof jacket. Rain didn't stop the work of keeping a town clean. At the depot, Tom had her usual route ready. "Might be a bit wet out there," he said unnecessarily. "I've worked in worse," Fiona replied, which was true. She had once conducted an emergency inspection of outdoor equipment during a winter storm, with snow whipping around her and temperatures well below freezing. A bit of English drizzle was nothing. She set off with her cart, beginning her rounds. The high street was quiet in the early morning rain. Most shops hadn't opened yet. The streets were slick with water, and fallen leaves had been plastered to the pavement by the rain. Fiona worked methodically, sweeping, collecting litter, making sure the drains weren't blocked by debris. This last task was important in rain-blocked drains could lead to flooding. As she worked near the town hall, she noticed something unusual. There was a faint smell in the air, sweet but unpleasant, chemical. It was very faint, barely noticeable, but it was there. Fiona paused, her instincts immediately alert. In her old work, unusual smells were always significant. They could indicate leaks, contamination, equipment failure. She had trained herself to notice them, to investigate them. But this wasn't a nuclear power station. This was a small town. The smell was probably something ordinary. Someone disposing of cleaning chemicals improperly, or waste from one of the shops. Still, she made a note of it. Old habits died hard. She continued her rounds, but the smell nagged at her. She encountered it again in 2 other locations, once near the church and once at the entrance to Victoria Park. Each time, it was faint, barely there, but definitely present. When she returned to the depot for lunch, she mentioned it to Tom. "Did you notice any unusual smells this morning?" "Something sweet and chemical." Tom thought about it. "Can't say I did, but I've been in the office all morning. Probably just someone dumping something they shouldn't. If you see it again, note the location, and I'll have one of the inspectors take a look." "I'll do that," Fiona said. She ate her lunch, the sandwich she had prepared that morning, and read a few pages of her book. Then she went back out for the afternoon shift. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp. The smell was still there, though perhaps slightly stronger now. Or maybe she was just more aware of it. Fiona tried to identify it more precisely. Sweet, but not pleasant. Chemical, but not like any common household chemical she could think of. There was something familiar about it, though. Something that tugged at a memory from her old work. She shook her head. She was being paranoid. This was Alder Hollow, not a nuclear facility. There were no dangerous chemicals here, no complex systems that could fail catastrophically. Just ordinary town life. But the smell bothered her all afternoon. And that evening, as she walked home, she realized why it was familiar. Methane. The smell reminded her of methane gas. But methane itself was odorless. What she was smelling was the additive that was put into gas lines so that leaks could be detected. Mercaptan. But that didn't make sense. Natural gas leaks would be much more obvious, much stronger. This smell was very faint, intermittent. And it seemed to be in multiple locations, which wasn't how gas leaks worked. She was overthinking this. She was applying high-level risk analysis to a simple situation. This was exactly the kind of thing her therapist had warned her about. Hypervigilance, seeing threats where none existed, applying her old professional paranoia to ordinary life. She forced herself to let it go. If it was important, someone else would notice. Someone whose job it was to notice such things. Over the next few days, the smell persisted. Fiona noticed it at various locations around town. Always faint, always fleeting, but definitely there. On Wednesday, she attended the town hall meeting, something she rarely did. She told herself it was because Mayor Thornton had invited her, but really, she wanted to see if anyone else had noticed the smell, if anyone had reported it. The meeting was held in the community center and was well attended. About 60 people were there, a decent turnout for a town of 3,000. Mayor Thornton stood at the front with several council members, including Tom Henderson, who served on the Public Works Committee. The meeting covered various topics: plans for the summer festival, a proposal to renovate the children's playground, a discussion about parking on the high street, the need for volunteers for various community projects. During the public comment period, Fiona raised her hand. "Yes, Miss Fiona?" Mayor Thornton said with a welcoming smile. Fiona stood, feeling dozens of eyes turned toward her. She wasn't comfortable with public speaking, but she felt compelled to mention this. "I wanted to ask if anyone else has noticed an unusual smell around town recently. It's faint, but it has a sweet, chemical quality. I've noticed it in several locations over the past few days. There was a moment of silence. People looked at each other, shrugging or shaking their heads. "I can't say I've noticed anything," Mayor Thornton said. "Has anyone else?" A few more head shakes. No one else had noticed. "Where exactly have you noticed this smell?" asked Councillor Price, who handled environmental matters. "Various locations," Fiona said. "The High Street near the church, Victoria Park, the area around the Waterworks building." "The Waterworks?" Councillor Price frowned. "That's interesting. I'll have someone check it out. Could be something to do with the treatment process. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, Miss Fiona." "Thank you," Fiona said, sitting down. She felt foolish. Everyone else was looking at her like she might be imagining things. An old woman making a fuss about nothing. After the meeting, Father Michael approached her. "That was good of you to speak up," he said. "Even if no one else has noticed it, if you have, it's worth checking." "I hope I'm not wasting anyone's time," Fiona said. "Caution is never a waste," Father Michael assured her. "Better safe than sorry, as they say." Mrs. Davies, who had also attended the meeting, walked home with Fiona. "You do smell things more keenly than most people, dear," she said diplomatically. "You notice things. It's part of your nature, but I'm sure if there was anything dangerous, the council would handle it." "I'm sure you're right," Fiona said. But she wasn't sure, because now she was thinking about the Waterworks building. The town's water supply came from a reservoir in the hills, was treated at the waterworks, and then distributed through underground pipes. If there was a problem there, it could affect the entire town. She told herself she was being ridiculous. The waterworks was modern, well-maintained, and regularly inspected. If there was a problem, it would be detected through normal monitoring procedures. She wasn't responsible for this. It wasn't her job. She had left that world behind. But that night, she dreamed of alarms and red lights again. Thursday morning, Fiona made a decision. She would investigate this herself, just to put her own mind at ease. Not officially, not as part of her job. Just a private check to satisfy her own concerns. She knew this was probably a sign that she wasn't as healed as she thought, that her anxiety was manifesting as hypervigilance. But she had learned over the years that sometimes the only way to silence the anxiety was to check, to know for certain that everything was safe. During her lunch break, instead of eating at the depot, she walked to the Waterworks building. It was a low, modern structure on the edge of town, surrounded by a fence. The building housed the treatment facilities and pumping stations that served Alder Hollow. Fiona stood outside the fence, looking at the building. There was nothing obviously wrong. No visible leaks, no signs of damage. But the smell was stronger here. Definitely stronger. "Can I help you?" A voice startled her. She turned to see a man in his 30s, wearing a high-visibility vest with Alder Hollow Water Services printed on it. His name tag read Peter Jacobs. "I'm sorry," Fiona said. "I was just curious. I work for the council, you see. Street maintenance. I've been noticing an unusual smell around town, and it seems stronger near here." Peter frowned. "A smell? What kind of smell?" "Sweet, chemical? Very faint most places, but stronger here." Peter sniffed the air. "I can't smell anything unusual. But then, I'm here every day. You get used to the normal smells of the place. Could I possibly look around? Just to satisfy my curiosity?" Peter hesitated. "I'm not really supposed to let people in without authorization." "But you work for the council, you said?" "Yes, for 12 years. Tell you what, let me get my supervisor. He can decide. Wait here." Peter disappeared into the building. Fiona waited, feeling slightly foolish. What was she doing? She was a street sweeper, not an inspector. She had no authority here, No official reason to be poking around. But something was wrong. She could feel it. The same intuition that had served her so well in her previous career was now screaming at her that something was not right. Peter returned with an older man who introduced himself as Douglas Webb, the waterworks supervisor. "Peter says you've noticed a smell?" Douglas said. He didn't seem hostile, just curious. "Yes, I'm Fiona Wexler. I work street maintenance for the council. Over the past week, I've noticed an unusual smell at various points around town. It's strongest here, near your facility." Douglas sniffed the air thoughtfully. I can see what you mean, actually. Sweet, you said? Chemical? Yes, exactly. Could be something to do with the treatment chemicals. We use various additives in the treatment process, but they shouldn't be detectable outside. Let me show you around and you can tell me if the smell is stronger in any particular area. He opened the gate and Fiona followed him and Peter into the facility grounds. They walked around the perimeter of the building first. "Here," Fiona said, stopping at the northwest corner. "The smell is definitely stronger here." Douglas crouched down, examining the ground. "This is where the main supply line comes in from the reservoir. But it's all underground. There shouldn't be any smell." "Could there be a leak?" Fiona asked. "The pipes are regularly monitored. We'd know if there was a pressure drop, but I'll make a note to have this area checked thoroughly." He stood up, brushing off his hands. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Miss Wexler, Fiona Wexler." "Well, Miss Wexler, if you notice the smell getting stronger or spreading to new areas, please let me know immediately. Here's my card." He handed her a business card with his contact information. "Thank you," Fiona said. "I hope I'm not making something out of nothing." "Better to check than ignore it," Douglas said, echoing what Father Michael had told her. "That's good civic responsibility." Fiona returned to work, but she couldn't shake her unease. The smell was real. It was strongest near the waterworks. And neither Peter nor Douglas had seemed particularly concerned, which worried her. In her old job, any unusual observation was treated as potentially significant until proven otherwise. There were protocols for investigation, procedures for testing, systems for verification. Here she had made a report and it might or might not be followed up on. That evening, she did something she hadn't done in 12 years. She opened her laptop and began researching. She looked up information about water treatment facilities, about the chemicals used in water purification, about potential contamination sources, about underground infrastructure. And then she looked up something more specific. She researched the area around Alder Hollow, its history, its geology. What she found made her blood run cold. Fiona sat at her kitchen table, her laptop screen glowing in the dim evening light. What she had discovered was alarming. Alder Hollow sat in a valley that had a long industrial history. 2 miles to the north, there had once been a coal mine, the Thornberry Mine, which had operated from 1880 until 1968. The mine had been closed and supposedly sealed, but Fiona knew that old mines were never truly gone. They left behind a network of tunnels and shafts, often filled with water, sometimes with pockets of gas. Coal mines produced methane gas. Even abandoned mines could continue to produce and release gas for decades after closure. The waterworks building and the underground water pipes serving Alder Hollow passed directly over part of the old mine works. Fiona sat back, her heart beating faster. This could be nothing, or it could be something serious. Methane itself was not toxic to breathe in small quantities, but it was highly explosive. If methane was leaking from the old mine works and somehow entering the town's water pipes or other underground infrastructure, it could accumulate. And if it reached the right concentration, between 5 and 15% in air, it could explode. Moreover, Fiona remembered something else from her extensive safety training. Old coal mines often contained other gases besides methane: carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide. Some of these were highly toxic. The sweet smell she had been detecting might not be methane additive at all. It could be hydrogen sulfide, which in low concentrations had a sweet smell. In higher concentrations, it was deadly. But she was jumping to conclusions. She didn't have data. She didn't have measurements. She had a smell and some historical research. She needed more information. Friday morning, Fiona reported for work as usual, but she was distracted. She completed her rounds on autopilot, her mind working through the problem. She needed to convince someone to take this seriously, to do proper testing, to investigate whether there was gas migration from the old mine works. But who would listen to her? She was a street sweeper. She had no credentials in this area, at least none that anyone in Alder Hollow knew about. If she revealed her background, explained her qualifications, people would listen. But that would mean opening up her past, explaining why she had left her career, facing questions she had spent 12 years avoiding. She wasn't ready for that. She might never be ready. During her lunch break, she called Douglas Webb at the waterworks. "Mr. Webb, this is Fiona Wexler. I spoke with you yesterday about the smell near your facility." "Yes, Miss Wexler. We've made a note to check it out next week during our routine maintenance." "Next week might be too late," Fiona said carefully. "I've been doing some research. Did you know that the old Thornberry mine passes underneath this area?" There was a pause. "I'm aware there's an old mine somewhere in the vicinity, yes. But it was sealed decades ago. Sealed mines can still release gases, methane, carbon monoxide, other substances. If gas is migrating through the ground, it could be entering your water lines or other underground infrastructure." "Miss Wexler," Douglas said, his tone becoming slightly patronizing, "I appreciate your concern, but we have strict safety protocols. If there were dangerous gas levels, our monitors would detect them. Do you have gas monitors in the underground sections near where the mine works pass?" Another pause. "We have monitors at key points in the facility. But not in all the underground infrastructure?" "Miss Wexler, we're a small-town water service. We don't have the budget or resources for extensive monitoring. We follow all regulations and conduct regular safety checks. I assure you, if there were a significant problem, we would know about it." Fiona wanted to scream. This was exactly the kind of complacency that led to disasters. The assumption that because everything had been fine so far, everything would continue to be fine. The failure to consider low probability but high consequence scenarios. But she kept her voice calm. "I understand. Could you at least move up the inspection schedule? Check it this week instead of next?" "I'll see what I can do," Douglas said, in a tone that suggested he would do nothing. "Thank you for your call, Miss Wexler." He hung up. Fiona sat in the depot break room, frustrated. She had tried. She had reported it. She had done her civic duty. That should be enough. But it wasn't enough. Because she knew, in her bones, that something was wrong. And if something happened, if people got hurt because she hadn't pushed harder, she would never forgive herself. Over the weekend, Fiona made a decision. She would do her own investigation, proper testing, scientific measurement. She would gather data, and then she would present that data in a way that couldn't be ignored. She still had some equipment from her old life. When she had left the nuclear industry, she had kept a few instruments, partly because they were her own personal equipment, and partly because she hadn't been able to let go completely. A portable gas detector that could measure various substances, a radiation meter, though that wasn't relevant here. A few other tools. They were in a box in her attic, untouched for 12 years. She retrieved them Saturday afternoon, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the box. The gas detector was a sophisticated piece of equipment, capable of detecting methane, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and several other gases. It was battery-powered and portable. She checked the battery, dead, of course, after 12 years. But she had spare batteries, kept for emergencies, and they still had charge. The device powered on. The screen glowed. It still worked. Fiona felt a surge of something. Not quite excitement, not quite fear. This was her world. This was what she knew. For 12 years, she had swept streets and tended gardens. But this was what she had been trained for, what she was good at. On Sunday, instead of her usual walk, she took the gas detector and walked around Alder Hollow, taking measurements. She started at the Waterworks building. At the northwest corner, where the smell had been strongest, she took a reading. Methane, 0.3% of lower explosive limit, LEL. Carbon monoxide, 15 parts per million. Hydrogen sulfide, 0.5 parts per million. These levels were low, not immediately dangerous, but they were present. In an outdoor, well-ventilated area, there shouldn't be any detectable levels of these gases. She took readings at several other points around town where she had noticed the smell. The pattern was clear. There were elevated levels of these gases at multiple locations, always near underground infrastructure. And there was something else. The levels were increasing. On Sunday, they were slightly higher than what she would have expected based on her observations earlier in the week. This was active gas migration, and it was getting worse. Monday morning, Fiona went directly to the town hall. She asked to speak with Mayor Thornton, saying it was urgent. The receptionist, a young woman named Sophie, looked at her with surprise. "Is everything all right, Miss Fiona?" "I need to speak with the mayor about a potential safety issue. Let me check if she's available." A few minutes later, Fiona was ushered into Mayor Thornton's office. The mayor looked up from her desk with a welcoming but slightly puzzled smile. "Fiona. This is unexpected. Please sit down." Sophie said something about a safety issue. Fiona sat, holding her gas detector in her lap. "Mayor Thornton, Margaret, I need you to listen to me carefully. I believe the town may be in danger." The mayor's expression became more serious. "Go on." "For the past week and a half, I've been noticing an unusual smell around town. I reported it at the town hall meeting, and I spoke with Douglas Webb at the Waterworks. But I'm not sure anyone is taking it seriously. What kind of danger are we talking about?" "Gas migration from the old Thornbury mine. Methane, carbon monoxide, possibly other gases seeping up through the ground and entering underground infrastructure." Mayor Thornton frowned. "The Thornbury mine was closed and sealed over 50 years ago. Closed mines can still release gases for decades, and I have data." Fiona pulled out a notebook where she had recorded her measurements. "I took gas readings at multiple locations around town yesterday. The levels are low but detectable, and they're increasing." The mayor looked at the notebook, then at Fiona. "Where did you get the equipment to take these measurements?" This was the question Fiona had been dreading. She took a breath. "Before I came to Alder Hollow, I worked in industrial safety. I have training in gas detection and environmental monitoring. I kept some personal equipment." "Industrial safety," the mayor repeated. "What industry?" "Nuclear power," Fiona said quietly. "I was a safety engineer at Hartwell Point Nuclear Power Station for 25 years. The mayor's eyes widened. "You're a nuclear safety engineer?" "I was. I'm not anymore. I left that career for personal reasons. When I came here, I wanted to leave that life behind. I wanted simplicity and privacy, so I didn't tell anyone. For 12 years, you've been working as a street sweeper, and you're actually a highly qualified engineer? Yes. Mayor Thornton sat back in her chair, processing this information. Why are you telling me now? Because I think the town is in danger, and I can't stay silent. The gas levels I'm detecting are low, but they're present and increasing. If this continues, we could face serious problems. At minimum, health issues from carbon monoxide exposure. At worst, if methane accumulates in enclosed spaces, there's a risk of explosion. The mayor was silent for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Sophie, get me Douglas Webb from the Waterworks, Counselor Price, and Chief Roberts from the fire department. I need them here within the hour. Tell them it's urgent. She hung up and looked at Fiona. I'm going to need you to explain everything to them. All the technical details. Can you do that? Fiona felt her chest tighten. This was what she had been avoiding. Stepping back into that role, being the expert again, taking on responsibility for people's safety. But she had no choice. Yes, she said. I can do that. Within an hour, 4 people were gathered in the mayor's office. Douglas Webb from the Waterworks, looking annoyed at being called away from his duties. Counselor Price, the environmental officer, looking concerned. Chief Alan Roberts from the volunteer fire department, a competent man in his 50s who took safety seriously. And Fiona. Mayor Thornton got straight to the point. Thank you all for coming on short notice. We have a potential emergency situation. Fiona Wexler has brought some concerns to my attention, and I need you all to hear what she has to say. Fiona? All eyes turned to her. Fiona felt the familiar flutter of anxiety but pushed it down. She had done this before. She had briefed directors, regulators, emergency services. She could do it again. Gentlemen, Mayor, she began, her voice steady. For the past 10 days, I have been detecting an unusual smell at various locations around Alder Hollow. I have investigated and identified this as gas migration from the old Thornberry mine works. Using professional-grade gas detection equipment, I have measured elevated levels of methane, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide at multiple points around town, particularly near underground infrastructure. She handed out copies of her measurements. These levels are currently below immediately dangerous thresholds, but they are present and increasing. This suggests active and ongoing gas migration. Douglas Webb frowned at the papers. Where did you get this equipment? And what qualifies you to make these measurements? Before coming to Alder Hollow, I spent 25 years as a safety and risk assessment engineer at Hartwell Point Nuclear Power Station. I have extensive training in environmental monitoring, gas detection, and emergency response. I've kept my professional equipment. There was a stunned silence. Chief Roberts spoke first. You're telling us that for 12 years, we've had a nuclear safety expert living in our town, working as a street sweeper? Yes, Fiona said simply. Why? Counselor Price asked. Why would someone with your qualifications take such a job? Personal reasons that aren't relevant to this situation, Fiona said firmly. What is relevant is that we have a developing situation that requires immediate attention. Mayor Thornton interceded. Gentlemen, Miss Wexler's background and career choices are her private business. What matters now is whether her assessment is correct and what we need to do about it. Chief Roberts studied the measurement data. These are low levels. Are they really dangerous? Not immediately, Fiona said. But gas migration is unpredictable. The levels could increase rapidly. Moreover, these gases can accumulate in enclosed or poorly ventilated spaces, basements, underground utility corridors, even inside buildings if they enter through cracks in foundations. Carbon monoxide is toxic even at moderate concentrations. Methane is explosive between 5 and 15% concentration in air. Douglas Webb was defensive. We would have detected any problems at the waterworks. We have safety systems. Do you have gas monitors in your underground pump chambers? Fiona asked. Well, no, but do you monitor the soil around your facilities for gas presence? That's not standard procedure for a water treatment plant. It should be when you're built over old mine works, Fiona said, more sharply than she intended. She took a breath. I'm not criticizing your operations, but this is an unusual situation that requires specific measures. What do you recommend? Mayor Thornton asked. Fiona had prepared for this question. Immediate steps. First, we need comprehensive gas monitoring throughout town, particularly in enclosed spaces and near underground infrastructure. Second, we need to identify the source. Specifically, we need to determine if gas is coming from the old mineworks, and, if so, which shafts or tunnels are venting. Third, we need to assess the town's water system for potential contamination. Fourth, we need to prepare for possible evacuation if levels rise to dangerous thresholds. Evacuation? Douglas Webb said. That seems extreme. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, Fiona said. It's a basic safety principle. Chief Roberts nodded. I agree with that. We'd rather be over-prepared than caught off guard. He looked at Fiona with new respect. What do you need from us? I need to do a comprehensive survey of the town, with proper equipment. My portable detector is good, but we need more extensive monitoring. We should contact the health and safety executive and request their assistance. This is within their jurisdiction. That could take days, Mayor Thornton said. Will we have days? I don't know, Fiona admitted. Gas migration is unpredictable. We might have days, weeks, or only hours. There was a heavy silence. Right, Mayor Thornton said decisively. Here's what we're going to do. Chief Roberts, prepare evacuation plans, but keep them quiet for now. No need to panic people unnecessarily. Douglas, I want you and your team to assist Fiona in surveying the town. Provide whatever she needs. Counselor Price, contact the health and safety executive. Explain the situation and request immediate assistance. And Fiona. The mayor looked at her seriously. You're going to lead this assessment. I'm temporarily designating you as a special advisor to the council on this matter. Will you accept? Fiona felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. The responsibility, the pressure, everything she had walked away from. But people's lives were at stake. Her neighbors, her friends, this town that had given her refuge. Yes, she said, I'll do it. Within hours, Fiona had transformed from a street sweeper into the town's emergency coordinator. It was a surreal transition, but one that felt oddly natural, like putting on a well-worn coat. Douglas Webb, having gotten over his initial skepticism, proved to be a valuable assistant. He knew the town's infrastructure intimately. Every pipe, every utility corridor, every access point. They began a systematic survey, starting with the waterworks and expanding outward. Fiona took measurements at every critical location, documenting everything carefully. Chief Roberts provided personnel, several firefighters who helped with the physical work of accessing underground locations. Young Peter Jacobs from the waterworks proved particularly helpful, eager to learn and quick to understand the technical aspects of what they were doing. By Tuesday evening, Fiona had a comprehensive map of gas readings across Alder Hollow. The pattern was clear and alarming. Gas levels were highest in a corridor running from northwest to southeast, exactly along the line where the old Thornberry mine tunnels passed under the town. The epicenter appeared to be near the town's main water reservoir, about a mile north of the waterworks. Even more concerning, The levels were rising. What had been 0.3% of LEL on Sunday was now 0.8% on Tuesday. Still not immediately dangerous, but the trend was unmistakable. That evening, Fiona met again with the emergency committee, which now included Mayor Thornton, Chief Roberts, Douglas Webb, Councillor Price, and Father Michael, who had been brought in as a community liaison. Fiona presented her findings using a large map of the town with her measurements marked. "The gas is definitely coming from the old mine works," she explained. "It's migrating up through geological fissures and entering underground infrastructure. The good news is that in open air, it disperses safely. The bad news is that it can accumulate in enclosed spaces." "How fast is it increasing?" Chief Roberts asked. "The levels are roughly doubling every 2 days. If this trend continues, we could reach potentially dangerous concentrations in enclosed spaces within a week." "What caused this to start now?" Father Michael asked. "The mine has been closed for over 50 years. "Several possibilities," Fiona said. "Recent heavy rain could have changed water levels in the mine, releasing trapped gas. There could have been a geological shift, opening new pathways. Or this has been happening slowly for a long time, and we're only now detecting it because the levels have risen enough to be noticeable." "Have you heard back from the health and safety executive?" Mayor Thornton asked Councillor Price. "Yes. They're sending a team, but they can't arrive until Friday. They said to monitor the situation and evacuate immediately if levels approach dangerous thresholds. Friday is 3 days away," Chief Roberts said. "We need to make some decisions before then." "I recommend that we begin precautionary measures," Fiona said. "We should install gas detectors in all public buildings, schools, the community center, the church. We should advise residents to ventilate their homes well and to be alert for symptoms of carbon monoxide exposure, headaches, dizziness, nausea, and we should prepare to evacuate the town if necessary." "If we start talking about evacuation, we'll cause panic," Douglas Webb said. "And if we don't prepare, we could cause deaths," Fiona countered. "People need to know there's a situation, but they also need to know we're handling it." Mayor Thornton nodded. "I'll make an announcement tomorrow. I'll explain that we're investigating a potential gas issue, that we have an expert assessing the situation, and that we're taking precautionary measures. I'll present it as being thorough and careful, not as an imminent crisis." "That's wise," Father Michael said. "People will trust that." "One more thing," Fiona said. "We need to identify the source more precisely. The old mine must have had air shafts and access points. If we can find where the gas is venting from underground, we might be able to seal it or at least control it." "Do we have maps of the old mine works?" Chief Roberts asked. "The county records office should have them," Councillor Price said. "I'll request them first thing in the morning." "Good," Mayor Thornton said. "Fiona, you'll continue monitoring? Keep us updated on any changes?" "Every 6 hours," Fiona confirmed. "I'll take measurements at key points throughout town and report any significant changes immediately." As the meeting broke up, Father Michael approached Fiona. "You're doing a brave thing," he said quietly. "Coming forward like this, using your skills to help, even though it means revealing yourself." "I don't feel brave," Fiona admitted. "I feel terrified. I left this world behind for a reason, but you came back when your community needed you. That's the definition of courage. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it." Fiona managed a small smile. "Thank you, Father." That night, she didn't sleep well. She was back in her old life, back in the world of risk assessment and crisis management. And all the memories, all the stress, all the things she had worked so hard to escape were flooding back. But she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when people were depending on her. Wednesday morning, Mayor Thornton made her announcement. She called a special town meeting in the community center, and word spread quickly through Alder Hollow. By 10 o'clock, the center was packed with concerned residents. Fiona stood at the side of the room, trying to be inconspicuous. But people kept glancing at her. The word had already spread, as it always did in a small town. Miss Fiona, the street sweeper, was actually some kind of expert. Miss Fiona had discovered a dangerous situation. Mayor Thornton spoke calmly and clearly. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I want to address some concerns and provide you with accurate information. Over the past week, we've become aware of gas migration from the old Thornberry mine works. This gas is seeping up through the ground in certain areas of town. There was an immediate murmur of concern through the crowd. Please, let me finish, the mayor continued. The levels of gas we're detecting are currently low and not immediately dangerous. However, we're taking this situation very seriously. We have brought in an expert to assess the situation, someone with extensive training and experience in environmental safety. Many of you know her as Fiona Wexler, who has worked for our council for 12 years. What you may not know is that before coming to Alder Hollow, Fiona was a senior safety engineer at a nuclear power station for 25 years. She has the qualifications and expertise to handle this situation, and she is working with our emergency services to keep everyone safe. All eyes turned to Fiona. She felt her face flush but stood straight, meeting their gazes. What do we need to do? Someone called out. Mayor Thornton nodded to Fiona, inviting her to speak. Fiona stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. The gas consists primarily of methane and carbon monoxide, she explained. In open air, it disperses harmlessly. The concern is accumulation in enclosed spaces. I recommend that everyone open windows in their homes, ensure good ventilation, and be alert for symptoms of carbon monoxide exposure. Headaches, dizziness, nausea, confusion. If you experience these symptoms, get into fresh air immediately and call for medical help. Is this dangerous? Mrs. Davies called out. Should we evacuate? Right now, evacuation is not necessary, Fiona said. But we're preparing evacuation plans as a precaution. The health and safety executive is sending a team to arrive Friday. They'll have more sophisticated equipment and additional personnel. In the meantime, we're monitoring the situation continuously. How did this happen? Mr. Chen asked. We're still investigating the exact cause, but old mines can release gases for many decades after closure. This isn't uncommon in areas with mining history. Why didn't anyone know about this before? Someone else asked. The levels have been low until recently. They've only risen to detectable levels in the past week or two. This is why we're being proactive now. There were more questions, which Fiona and Mayor Thornton answered as best they could. Gradually, the initial panic subsided. People were still concerned, but they weren't panicking. They trusted that the situation was being handled. After the meeting, many people approached Fiona directly. Some thanked her. Some asked more detailed questions. Some simply looked at her with new eyes, reassessing the woman they had known for so long. Mrs. Davies hugged her. I always knew you were special, dear, but I had no idea. A nuclear engineer, and here you've been, sweeping our streets. It's complicated, Fiona said. I'm sure it is. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you noticed this problem. Young Emma Richardson came up with her mother. Miss Fiona, are you really a scientist? I'm an engineer, Fiona said. Engineers use science to solve practical problems. That's so cool. When I grow up, I want to be an engineer too. Jennifer Richardson smiled at Fiona over her daughter's head. Thank you for keeping us safe. Not everyone was positive. Some people seemed angry or suspicious. Why had she hidden her past? What else might she be hiding? Could they really trust her? But most people were simply grateful. And as Fiona left the community center, she realized something. She had been afraid that revealing herself would lead to rejection, to questions she couldn't answer, to judgment. Instead, she had found acceptance. This community that she had kept at arm's length for 12 years was embracing her, supporting her, trusting her. It was both overwhelming and humbling. That afternoon, Fiona, Chief Roberts, and Peter Jacobs drove to the county records office in the nearby city. They spent several hours going through old files, looking for information about the Thornberry mine. They found what they needed: original mine plans from 1880, updated plans from 1950, and closure documents from 1968. The documents showed a complex network of tunnels extending under what was now Alder Hollow, with several access shafts and a main ventilation shaft. According to these documents, Fiona said, studying the maps carefully, the main ventilation shaft was sealed with a concrete cap. But there were at least 4 smaller access shafts that were simply filled with rubble. And those could be venting gas? Chief Roberts asked. Exactly. Rubble fill can settle over time, creating pathways for gas to escape. We need to locate these shafts. Using GPS coordinates and the old maps, they identified the likely locations of the shafts. 2 were in fields north of town, 1 was in a wooded area, and 1, concerningly, was believed to be underneath or very near the town's water reservoir. They drove out to the reservoir site. The reservoir was a large concrete structure built in the 1970s, holding several million gallons of water. It was surrounded by a fence and a maintenance road. Fiona and Chief Roberts walked around the perimeter using Fiona's gas detector. Near the northeast corner of the reservoir, the readings spiked dramatically. Methane, 3.2% of LEL carbon monoxide, 85 parts per million. Hydrogen sulfide, 2.3 parts per million. This is it, Fiona said. This is the main venting point. They examined the ground carefully. There was a depression in the earth, perhaps 20 feet across, with some old concrete visible at the center. This must be where the old mine shaft had been capped or filled. The cap or fill has failed, Fiona said. Gas is venting directly from the mine into the atmosphere, and because the reservoir is nearby, some of the gas is getting into the water system infrastructure. Can we seal it? Chief Roberts asked. Not quickly or easily. This would require specialized equipment and expertise, but knowing where it is helps us predict how the gas will spread and where the highest risks are. They took extensive measurements and photographs, documenting everything. This information would be crucial for the health and safety executive team when they arrived. As they were finishing, Peter Jacobs, who had been examining the reservoir itself, called out to them, "Miss Wexler, Chief, you should see this." They hurried over. Peter was pointing at a section of the reservoir wall where there were visible cracks in the concrete. "These cracks weren't here last month," Peter said. "I walk this perimeter regularly. These are new." Fiona examined the cracks carefully, then took gas readings near them. Elevated levels. The gas was seeping through the cracks. "The ground is shifting," she said. "The old mine workings underneath are subsiding, and it's affecting surface structures. The reservoir itself might be compromised." "Is there a risk of the reservoir failing?" Chief Roberts asked, alarm in his voice. "I don't think it's imminent, but it needs immediate engineering assessment. If the reservoir structure is compromised and then fails, we're talking about millions of gallons of water flooding the town." They looked at each other, the implications sinking in. This was worse than they had thought. Not only was there a gas hazard, but there was a potential structural hazard as well. They rushed back to town and immediately called an emergency meeting of the crisis committee. When Fiona explained what they had found, there was stunned silence. "We need structural engineers," Mayor Thornton said, "immediately. And we need to consider partial evacuation," Fiona added. "The area of town closest to the reservoir in the valley below it is at risk if the reservoir fails. That's about 500 people." "Can we wait until the Health and Safety Executive Team arrives on Friday?" Douglas Webb asked. "I don't think we can wait," Fiona said. "The cracks in the reservoir are new. The situation is actively deteriorating. If we wait and something happens, we'll have casualties." Mayor Thornton made a decision. "We evacuate the valley area tonight. We'll use the community center as a temporary shelter for those who don't have family or friends to stay with elsewhere. Chief Roberts, coordinate the evacuation. Councillor Price, get structural engineers here as soon as humanly possible. And Fiona, I need you to continue monitoring. If the gas levels spike, or if there are any other concerning developments, we need to know immediately." Everyone moved into action. By early evening, word had spread through Alder Hollow about the evacuation order. Chief Roberts, with his volunteer firefighters and several council members, went door to door in the valley area, explaining the situation and helping people prepare to leave. Most people cooperated, though some were reluctant. They didn't want to leave their homes. They thought the authorities were overreacting. Fiona went with Chief Roberts to some of the more difficult cases. At the home of old Mr. Thornton, whom she had greeted every morning for 12 years, they found him adamant about staying. "I've lived in this house for 40 years, he said stubbornly. "I'm not leaving because of some gas no one can even see." "Mr. Thornton," Fiona said gently, "I wouldn't ask you to leave if it wasn't necessary. The reservoir above the town has cracks. If it fails, this entire valley could flood in minutes. You wouldn't survive that. You're a street sweeper." The spirit of community was strong. Despite the fear and uncertainty, people were helping each other. Neighbors were offering spare rooms. The local pub owner brought hot meals. Mrs. Davies, though she lived outside the evacuation zone, was at the center helping organize supplies. By 10 o'clock, all 500 residents from the valley area had been accounted for. Some were at the shelter. Others were staying with family or friends in other parts of town or neighboring communities. Fiona, exhausted but unable to stop, continued taking measurements. The gas levels were still rising, but not as rapidly as before. Perhaps the increased ventilation from all the opened windows was helping. Father Michael found her sitting on a bench outside the church, reviewing her data by flashlight. "You should rest," he said gently. "You've been going non-stop for 3 days." "I can't rest yet. Not until I know everyone is safe." "You can't save everyone all by yourself, Fiona. Why should I listen to you?" "Because I'm also an engineer with 25 years of experience in safety and risk assessment. Because I understand structural failure and what happens when millions of gallons of water break free. And because I care about you and want you to be safe." Mr. Thornton looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. All right, I'll go. But I'm not happy about it." "You don't have to be happy about it. You just have to be safe." They helped him pack a bag and drove him to the community center. The community center was transformed into an emergency shelter. Cots were set up. The town's restaurants and the church provided food. People who weren't being evacuated brought supplies, blankets, pillows, toiletries. "I know, but I have to try." Father Michael sat beside her. "This is what you were running from, isn't it? This responsibility, this weight." Fiona was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "At the power station, every day, thousands of lives depended on the decisions I made. On whether I had checked everything thoroughly enough. On whether I had anticipated every possible failure mode. The pressure was immense. And then, when we had a small incident, just a minor leak, completely contained, no one hurt, I broke. I realized I couldn't carry that weight anymore. So I ran. I found a place where no one needed me to be responsible for anything more important than clean streets. But now you're carrying that weight again. Because I have to. These are my friends, my neighbors. This is my home. I can't watch them walk into danger without doing everything I can to protect them. That's the mark of true character, Father Michael said. You could have stayed silent. You could have let someone else handle it, but you didn't. Because fundamentally, you're someone who protects people. That's who you are, whether you're sweeping streets or running a nuclear power station. Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. I'm scared, Father. I'm so scared. What if I miss something? What if I'm wrong? What if people get hurt because of my advice? Fear is not the absence of courage. Courage is acting despite fear. You're doing that. And whatever happens, you're doing your best with the information and resources available. That's all any of us can do. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Fiona stood. I should take another round of measurements. Document the evening readings. Then I'll walk with you. Extra company never hurt. Together, they walked through the darkened town, Fiona stopping periodically to take readings, Father Michael providing companionship and moral support. Alder Hollow was quieter than usual. Many homes in the valley area were dark and empty. But in other areas, lights burned late as people stayed up, worried about their neighbors, their town, their future. Fiona barely slept that night. She set alarms to wake herself every 2 hours to take measurements. Each time, she walked through the dark streets of Alder Hollow with her gas detector, checking key locations. The readings stayed relatively stable through the night, elevated, concerning, but not critically dangerous. At 5 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep and made herself tea. As dawn broke, she was at her kitchen window again, watching the sun rise over the town, just as she had done thousands of mornings before. But everything was different now. She was different. The secret she had kept for 12 years was out. The simple life she had built was disrupted. She was back in the world of crisis and responsibility, and yet there was a strange sense of relief. She didn't have to hide anymore. She didn't have to pretend to be someone she wasn't. The people of Alder Hollow knew who she was, and they had accepted her. Her phone rang. It was Mayor Thornton. Morning, Fiona. How are the readings? Stable through the night, still elevated, but not increasing rapidly. That's good news. The structural engineers are arriving this morning. They'll assess the reservoir. And the health and safety executive team is en route. They'll be here by noon instead of tomorrow. I pushed for emergency priority status. That's excellent. How are you holding up? Fiona considered the question. I'm managing. Tired, but managing. We're having another community meeting at 10 o'clock. People will want an update. Can you be there? Of course. At the community meeting, the atmosphere was tense, but more controlled than before. People had had time to process the initial shock. Now they wanted information and reassurance. Fiona presented her overnight monitoring data, explaining that the situation was serious but currently stable. Mayor Thornton updated everyone on the incoming professional support. Then, Chief Roberts spoke about the evacuation. I want to thank everyone who cooperated with the evacuation order. I know it was difficult to leave your homes. We're hoping you can return soon, but your safety is our priority. A woman in the audience stood up. How long before we know if it's safe to go back? The structural engineers will assess the reservoir today, Fiona said. If they determine it's stable, and if we can manage the gas situation, you should be able to return within a few days. If the reservoir needs repair work, it might be longer. Another man asked, "Who's paying for all this?" "I have a business. I can't just close indefinitely." "The council will work with affected businesses," Mayor Thornton assured him. "We'll apply for emergency assistance from the government. We're going to take care of our community." The meeting continued with more questions and answers. Fiona was impressed by how calmly most people were handling the situation. There were no wild accusations, no panic, just a community trying to navigate a crisis together. After the meeting, Mrs. Henderson from the library approached Fiona. "I wanted to thank you properly. My house is in the evacuation zone. If you hadn't caught this, if you hadn't insisted on investigating, I don't like to think what might have happened." "I'm just glad I noticed," Fiona said. "It's more than that. You put yourself forward. You took on responsibility when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That takes real courage." Similar conversations happened throughout the morning. People thanking her, expressing gratitude, showing trust. And slowly, Fiona began to realize something. She had been hiding for 12 years because she was afraid. Afraid of the responsibility, afraid of failing, afraid of the judgment of others. But facing those fears directly was liberating. She hadn't failed. She was helping. And far from judging her, the community was supporting her. Perhaps, she thought, strength wasn't about never breaking. Perhaps it was about healing, and then finding the courage to be strong again when it mattered. The structural engineers arrived at 11 o'clock, a team of 3 from a firm in London that specialized in water infrastructure. They were led by Dr. Patricia Hammond, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. Fiona met them at the town hall and briefed them on the situation, showing them her measurements and the photographs from the reservoir. Dr. Hammond reviewed the materials with a practiced eye. "You've done excellent preliminary work. Your background? Nuclear power station safety engineer, retired?" Dr. Hammond nodded. "That explains the thoroughness." "Right, let's get up to that reservoir and see what we're dealing with." They drove up to the reservoir site with Fiona, Chief Roberts, and Douglas Webb. Dr. Hammond and her team spent 2 hours examining the structure, taking measurements, using specialized equipment to assess the concrete integrity. Finally, they gathered to discuss their findings. "The good news," Dr. Hammond said, "is that the reservoir isn't at imminent risk of catastrophic failure. The cracks are concerning, but the overall structure is still sound." "And the bad news?" Fiona asked. "The bad news is that the subsidence is ongoing. The ground underneath is settling as the old mine works collapse or shift. If this continues, the reservoir could fail in weeks or months. We need to either repair and reinforce the structure, which will take time and money, or we need to empty the reservoir and build a new one elsewhere." "Can we empty it safely?" Mayor Thornton asked. "Yes, gradually. But that means Alder Hollow will need an alternate water source during the construction period." "We can truck water in," Douglas Webb said. "It won't be ideal, but we can manage." "There's another issue," Dr. Hammond continued. "The gas venting. That needs to be addressed. The mine works need to be properly sealed, or at least the venting needs to be controlled. Otherwise, you'll continue to have this problem." Just then, 3 vehicles arrived at the reservoir site. The health and safety executive team had arrived. The HSE team was led by Inspector Marcus Reed, a capable man in his 40s with extensive experience in mining-related hazards. With him were 2 technicians and a specialist in mine gas management. More introductions, more briefings. Fiona went through her findings again, showing them her data and the location of the venting shaft. Inspector Reed was impressed. "This is thorough preliminary work. You've essentially done our initial assessment for us. Now we need to take more detailed measurements and determine the extent of the problem." For the rest of the day, the professionals took over. They had sophisticated equipment that Fiona's portable detector couldn't match. They mapped the gas dispersion across the entire town. They examined the old mine shaft location. They took soil samples and air samples. Fiona stayed with them, both to provide local knowledge and because she couldn't quite let go of the situation. She needed to know what they found, needed to understand the full scope of the problem. By evening, Inspector Reed had preliminary findings. The gas migration is worse than your initial assessment suggested, he told the assembled crisis committee. The levels are rising faster than Ms. Wexler's measurements indicated, probably because her equipment, while good, isn't as sensitive as ours. We're seeing elevated levels not just in the valley area, but throughout the town. How dangerous is it? Mayor Thornton asked. Currently, not immediately life-threatening in most areas, but in enclosed spaces, basements, utility corridors, poorly ventilated buildings, we're approaching potentially dangerous levels, and it's getting worse. What do you recommend? Chief Roberts asked. Full evacuation of the town. Tonight, if possible, tomorrow morning at the latest. There was a stunned silence. The entire town? Councillor Price said. 3,000 people? I understand it's drastic, but we have a duty of care. If gas levels continue to rise at the current rate, we could have serious incidents, carbon monoxide poisoning, potential explosions in enclosed spaces. I can't authorize people to remain in what could become a dangerous environment. Mayor Thornton looked at Fiona. Do you agree with this assessment? Fiona felt the weight of the question. 3,000 people, an entire community displaced, enormous disruption, cost, hardship. But if people stayed and something happened? Yes, she said quietly. I agree. The risk is too high. Mayor Thornton took a deep breath. Then we evacuate. Chief Roberts, activate the full emergency plan. Councillor Price, contact County Emergency Management for support. Father Michael, I need you to coordinate with neighboring communities for temporary housing. And someone get me the regional media. We're going to need help spreading the word. Everyone moved into action. The crisis had escalated into a full-scale emergency. That night, Alder Hollow became a hub of controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles arrived from neighboring towns. The County Emergency Management Office sent coordinators and resources. The Red Cross set up operations. Evacuating an entire town was a massive logistical undertaking. People needed to pack belongings, arrange transportation, find places to stay. The elderly and those with medical needs required special assistance. Pets needed to be transported. Businesses needed to be secured. Fiona found herself coordinating between the technical teams and the community leaders. Her expertise was valuable in explaining the risks to people, helping them understand why this drastic measure was necessary. She went door to door in some areas, helping elderly residents pack, reassuring frightened children, explaining patiently to skeptics why they needed to leave. At one house, she found the Watson family struggling to decide what to take. We can't take everything, Mrs. Watson said, close to tears. What do we prioritize? Essentials first, Fiona said calmly. Medications, important documents, a few days' worth of clothes. Valuables, if you have room, jewelry, family photos, things that can't be replaced. The rest is just things. Things can be replaced. You and your family can't be. She helped them pack efficiently, keeping them focused and calm. At another home, she found young Emma Richardson crying because they had to leave her goldfish behind. We'll make sure someone comes by to feed your goldfish, Fiona promised. I'll do it myself if I have to. They'll be safe. Really? Emma sniffled. Really. I promise. Throughout the night, similar scenes played out across Alder Hollow. 3,000 people preparing to leave their homes, uncertain when they would return. By dawn on Friday, the evacuation was well underway. A steady stream of cars left the town, heading to temporary accommodation in neighboring communities. Those without transportation were helped by volunteers with buses and vans. The community center, ironically, was being used as a staging area rather than a shelter, since it too would have to be evacuated. By noon, most of the town was empty. Only emergency personnel remained: the HSE team, structural engineers, fire service, a few council officials, and Fiona. Mayor Thornton stood with Fiona on the steps of the town hall, looking at the eerily quiet streets. "It's strange, isn't it?" the mayor said. "The town looks normal, but there's no one here." "Like a ghost town," Fiona agreed. "How long until we can bring people back?" Inspector Reed says they need at least a week to implement a solution. They're going to seal the main mine shaft with a proper engineered cap and install venting systems to safely disperse any remaining gas. The structural engineers need time to assess whether the reservoir can be salvaged or if it needs to be replaced. A week minimum, possibly longer? Yes. We're a tough community. We'll survive this, but it's going to change us. Fiona nodded. She knew about how crisis changed things, how it revealed what was truly important, how it stripped away pretense and left only what was real. Over the following days, Fiona worked alongside the professional teams. Inspector Reed had recognized her expertise and essentially made her a technical liaison, which she appreciated. It gave her something to do, a way to feel useful during a time when she might otherwise have felt helpless. The HSE team worked quickly and efficiently. They brought in specialized equipment: industrial fans to increase air circulation, gas monitors placed throughout the town, and machinery to properly seal the mine shaft. The work on the mine shaft was complex. The old concrete cap had completely failed, crumbling away to expose the shaft opening. The new solution involved drilling down around the shaft to inject grout, creating a solid seal, and then capping it with a thick reinforced concrete cover. Additionally, they installed controlled venting pipes that would safely disperse any residual gas at higher altitudes where it could disperse harmlessly. Fiona watched as the workers executed this plan. It was methodical, professional work, exactly the kind of engineered solution that she appreciated. Every step was calculated, measured, verified. The structural engineers, meanwhile, made their decision about the reservoir. The subsidence was too extensive. The reservoir would need to be decommissioned and a new one built at a different location, away from the old mine works. "It's going to cost millions," Dr. Hammond told the crisis committee, "but it's the only safe, long-term solution. In the meantime, you can use tanker trucks to supply water." Mayor Thornton handled the political and financial aspects with remarkable skill. She secured emergency funding from the government, negotiated with water companies for temporary supply, and coordinated with regional authorities for ongoing support. By the end of the first week, the mine shaft had been sealed and the venting systems installed. Gas levels throughout town began to drop immediately. Inspector Reed conducted final testing and declared, "The immediate hazard has been mitigated. Gas levels are back to safe ranges. However, I recommend continued monitoring for the next few months to ensure the seal is holding." "Can people come home?" Mayor Thornton asked. "Yes, I'm authorizing the return of residents, but with the caveat that gas monitors remain in place and people stay alert for any unusual smells or symptoms." The relief was palpable. The following Monday, 2 weeks after the evacuation began, the residents of Alder Hollow started returning home. It was a strange homecoming. The town looked exactly as they had left it, yet different somehow. Quieter. Changed by what had happened. Fiona helped coordinate the return, ensuring people knew which areas were clear for reoccupation first, where monitoring equipment was installed, what precautions to take. People returned to their homes with relief and gratitude. Yes, the crisis had been disruptive. Yes, it had been frightening. But their town had survived. No one had been hurt. They were home. Within a few days, life in Alder Hollow began to return to normal. Shops reopened. Children went back to school. The rhythm of daily life reasserted itself. But there were changes. The reservoir was being drained, and a temporary water tower had been erected. Throughout town, discreet gas monitoring stations kept watch, and everyone looked at Fiona Wexler differently now. She was no longer just the friendly street sweeper. She was the woman who had saved their town. On a sunny morning 3 weeks after the crisis began, Fiona reported to the council depot as usual. But Tom Henderson had news for her. "Fiona, the mayor wants to see you. Official meeting." Fiona walked to the town hall, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity. When she entered Mayor Thornton's office, she found not just the mayor, but also several council members. "Please sit," Mayor Thornton said warmly. "We have a proposal for you." Fiona sat, waiting. "The council has been discussing your future with us," the mayor continued. "Your actions over the past few weeks have been extraordinary. You identified a critical hazard, coordinated the initial response, worked with emergency services, and helped keep this community safe. We can't thank you enough." "I was just doing what needed to be done," Fiona said. "Perhaps. But you did it with exceptional skill and dedication. Which brings us to our proposal. We would like to create a new position on the council staff, Emergency Planning and Safety Officer. We would like you to fill that position." Fiona was stunned. I don't know what to say. The role would involve assessing potential hazards in the town, coordinating with emergency services, ensuring we have proper safety protocols and plans. It would use your expertise and experience. You'd be making a real difference. "It's a full-time position, of course," Councillor Price added, "with a salary appropriate to your qualifications." "We understand if you need time to think about it," Mayor Thornton said, "but we hope you'll accept." "We need you, Fiona. Alder Hollow needs you." Fiona sat in silence for a moment, processing the offer. This was a return to professional work, to using her skills, to taking on responsibility. Everything she had walked away from 12 years ago. But it was also different. This wasn't a nuclear power station with thousands of lives hanging on every decision. This was a small town, her community, work she could do without the crushing weight that had broken her before. And she realized something important. She had changed. The crisis had proven that to her. She had faced her fears and hadn't broken. She had taken on responsibility and handled it. She was stronger than she had thought. "Yes," she said, "I'll accept the position." Mayor Thornton beamed. "Wonderful. When can you start? Is Monday soon enough?" "Monday is perfect." Over the following months, Fiona settled into her new role. She conducted a comprehensive safety audit of Alder Hollow, identifying potential hazards and recommending mitigations. She developed emergency plans for various scenarios. She coordinated with county emergency management to ensure Alder Hollow was prepared for future crises. But more than that, she became a visible and valued member of the community in a new way. People sought her advice on safety matters. She gave talks at the school about emergency preparedness. She trained the fire service in hazard assessment. She was using her skills, her knowledge, her experience, but on her own terms, in a way that felt sustainable and meaningful. Her relationship with the town deepened. People knew her story now. Not all of it, but enough. They knew she had worked in nuclear safety, that she had left that field for personal reasons, that she had found a quiet life in Alder Hollow. And they respected that. They didn't pry into the details she kept private. They simply accepted her as one of their own, someone who had always been part of their community, who had stepped up when needed, who belonged. Mrs. Davies still brought soup, though now she joked that Fiona needed brain food for her important work. Young Emma Richardson's science project was about emergency preparedness, with Fiona as her advisor. Father Michael still had tea with her on Sunday afternoons, discussing philosophy and community and the nature of courage. 6 months after the crisis, on a crisp autumn evening, there was a town celebration. A delayed summer festival, renamed the Alder Hollow Resilience Festival, to commemorate how the community had come together during the emergency. There was music, food, games, and laughter. The entire town was there, plus many people from neighboring communities who had helped during the evacuation. Mayor Thornton gave a speech, thanking everyone who had contributed to keeping Alder Hollow safe, and she gave special recognition to Fiona. "We are lucky to have Fiona Wexler among us," the mayor said. "She saw a problem that others missed. She took action when it would have been easier to stay silent. She used her considerable expertise to guide us through a crisis, and now she continues to work to keep our community safe. Fiona, would you please come up here?" Fiona, reluctant as always with public attention, walked to the platform. The entire town was applauding her. "I have a presentation to make," Mayor Thornton said. "By unanimous vote of the town council, and with the support of our entire community, we are awarding you the Alder Hollow Medal of Merit, our town's highest honor for exceptional service to the community." She placed a simple but beautiful medal around Fiona's neck, a silver medallion engraved with the town's seal and the words, "For courage and service." And the applause was thunderous. People were standing, cheering. Fiona felt tears in her eyes. When the applause finally died down, the mayor gestured for Fiona to speak. Fiona hadn't prepared anything. She simply spoke from the heart. 12 years ago, I came to Alder Hollow because I was broken. I came here to hide, to heal, to escape from a world that had become too much for me. This town gave me that sanctuary. You accepted me without question. You gave me peace. And when crisis came, you gave me something even more precious. You gave me a chance to be useful again, to take the things that had broken me and use them for good. You trusted me, even when you didn't fully understand who I was or why I had come here. I didn't save this town alone. We saved it together. That's what communities do. We look out for each other. We use our gifts, whatever they may be, to protect and help each other. So this medal doesn't belong just to me. It belongs to all of us, to every person who evacuated their home without complaint, to every volunteer who helped their neighbors, to every emergency responder who worked around the clock, to every person who showed kindness and courage during a difficult time. This is what makes Alder Hollow special. Not its buildings or its streets, but its people. And I am honored, truly honored, to be one of you. The applause came again, louder than before. And as Fiona looked out at the faces of her neighbors, her friends, her community, she realized something profound. She had spent 12 years trying to leave her past behind, trying to be someone different, someone simpler. But she couldn't escape who she was. Her training, her instincts, her drive to protect people, these were fundamental parts of her. The crisis had forced her to confront that. And in confronting it, she had found a way forward. She didn't have to be the person she was at the nuclear station, carrying impossible weight and eventually breaking under it. But she also didn't have to hide her skills and expertise. She could be both things. The woman who had swept streets and tended gardens, finding peace in simple work, and the engineer who could assess complex problems and keep people safe. She could be Fiona Wexler, complete and whole in all her complexity. 2 years later, Fiona Wexler, now 70 years old, walked through Victoria Park on a crisp spring morning. She wasn't sweeping. That wasn't her job anymore. But she still walked these paths regularly, checking in, observing, noticing things. The town had recovered completely from the crisis. The new water reservoir had been built on a stable site away from the old mine works. The old reservoir site had been converted into a small nature reserve, with educational panels explaining the history of the area and the importance of environmental safety. Alder Hollow thrived. It had received attention from the media during the crisis, and surprisingly, that attention had been largely positive. The town that had successfully handled an emergency, that had demonstrated community resilience, that had showed how proper planning and expertise could prevent disaster. As a result, Alder Hollow had seen modest growth. A few young families had moved in, attracted by the town's character and sense of community. New businesses had opened. The school had expanded. Fiona had adapted to her role as emergency planning and safety officer. She found it fulfilling in ways she hadn't expected. The work used her skills but didn't consume her. She had time for her garden, for her reading, for her friends. She had even, tentatively, begun to process her past. With Father Michael's encouragement, she had resumed therapy, working through the trauma that had driven her to Alder Hollow in the first place. She was learning to forgive herself for being human, for having limits, for needing to step away from a job that had been destroying her. As she walked through the park, she saw Emma Richardson, now 10 years old, helping to plant flowers as part of a school project. "Miss Fiona," Emma called out. "Look, we're creating a pollinator garden." "That's wonderful, Emma. I'm proud of you. I'm still going to be an engineer when I grow up. Like you. Then you'll be an excellent engineer. The world needs more people who care about making things safer and better." Fiona continued her walk, greeting other townspeople as she went. Mrs. Davies with her sister, Tom Henderson walking his dog, the Chen family opening their bakery for the day. She reached the bench near the church, her favorite spot, and sat down. From here, she could see the whole town, the church spire, the high street, the surrounding countryside. This was home. Not just a place to hide, but genuinely home. A place where she belonged, where she was valued, where she could be herself. The trauma of her past would always be part of her. But it didn't define her anymore. She had survived, healed, and found a way to use even her wounds as sources of strength. She thought about the title of the medal she had received for courage and service. At first, she had felt she didn't deserve it. She had only done what was necessary, what her training had prepared her for. But she understood now. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear. And service wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up day after day, using whatever gifts you had to help others. She had swept streets for 12 years with the same care and attention she had once brought to nuclear safety, because whether the task was small or large, it mattered. It all mattered. A young couple walked by, new to town, and the woman stopped. "Excuse me, are you Fiona Wexler?" "I am," Fiona said. "We just moved here. We read about what you did, about the crisis. It's part of why we chose Alder Hollow. We wanted to be part of a community that takes care of each other like that." "Welcome to Alder Hollow," Fiona said warmly. "I think you'll like it here." After they left, Fiona sat a while longer, watching the town wake up to a new day. The sun climbed higher, painting everything gold. She thought about all the mornings she had stood at her kitchen window, watching the dawn, trying to hold on to peace. She still did that. But now it was different. Now she wasn't hiding from her past or running from responsibility. She was simply enjoying the moment, grateful for this place, these people, this life. She had been a senior engineer at a nuclear power station. She had been a street sweeper. She was now an emergency planning officer. But more than any title or role, she was a member of this community, a friend, a neighbor, someone who belonged. The church bell chimed 8 o'clock. Time to start her workday. Fiona stood, brushing off her trousers, and walked toward the town hall. There were plans to review, safety protocols to update, a meeting with the school about emergency drills, normal work, important work, work that used her skills without crushing her. As she walked, she passed the memorial that had been erected after the crisis, a simple stone marker with a plaque. In recognition of the Alder Hollow community who faced crisis with courage and unity, may we always remember, strength comes not from never falling, but from rising each time we do. Fiona touched the stone briefly as she passed, a small ritual she had developed. A reminder, a promise. She would continue to rise, to serve, to protect. Not because she had to, but because it was who she was. The quiet strength of Fiona Wexler had saved a town. But more than that, it had saved herself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest heroism of all, not the spectacular acts that made headlines, but the quiet courage of healing, of trying again, of allowing yourself to be strong in a new way. Alder Hollow was safe. Its people were safe. And Fiona Wexler, street sweeper, engineer, and guardian, walked into another day with her head held high and her heart at peace. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.